How should we react to the Julio Jones signing in Tampa? News that and more this week on the couch. Josh, Norris, how are you reacting to Julio Jones signing in Tampa Bay?
I think there's three pillars to this, and we'll start with the first one, Sig. Number one, Tom Brady might have been the most undervalued quarterback in fantasy drafts this summer. Easy to point in the direction of Trey Lance for that because he's climbed from about quarterback 12 to quarterback 9 over the last few months. But let's not forget that Tom Brady, quarterback 3 last season, led the league in 20-plus yard pass attempts. He has transformed his game, hasn't he, Sig?
Yeah.
In that he's not this avoid big plays, confrontation. No, he will live and die by the big pass now. And if he has to make a little mistake to create a big play, he will do it. And getting that as the quarterback 10 all off season, where to me, as the quarterback 7, just after those really top 6, because everyone's falling in love with the rushing upside of the young quarterbacks, I'm still on that train 100%. And this just solidifies that.
Yeah, if there is the biggest fantasy takeaway or the simplest and most actionable one, it is that the offense is a little bit more reinforced now for Tom Brady. And what you got to love about Brady for fantasy, like you said, he's transformed. It really, I think the fuse was lit in that. That's 2007 with Welker and Moss. And what you like about Brady, it's old school, simple football in a way, Josh, because it's if it works, keep doing it. If it works, keep doing it. That's why I was in, and I still will be in on Mike Evans in the second round.
Oh, yeah.
Because, so here's, I'm going to go ahead and pontificate. I'm going to get up on my
soapbox
here.
This is why I'm here, Sig.
Yeah, well, look, it's interesting to see all the knee-jerk reactions because, if you want something actionable to take away from this, it isn't mourn if you took Russell Gage already in your best ball drafts. It's make sure that you get him on the way down. I mean, there is something in there. The other piece of news that Chris Godwin isn't going to go on the PUP is good news. But again, with Julio Jones in tow, if Julio Jones is healthy, if Julio Jones can play a significant role, then they can bring Godwin along slower. So maybe where he might have been rushed back, I mean, it probably puts Godwin on more of a positive range of outcomes in terms of avoiding him coming back too early or having a setback or having a period where he's not available. But we'll see how the mix goes. I think that, like you started with Brady, the main thing we should be thinking about when we're thinking about Tampa is this is a rich fantasy environment.
Oh, yeah.
Again, 3 top 13 wide receivers on a points per game basis last year. 3.
Now, Sig, can we make the comment of I'm with you on Mike Evans, and in fact, I think I had him all the way up as like wide receiver 5,
right?
Taking him ahead of CeeDee Lamb, despite him going after.
I took him over Devontae Adams before. I mean, like
I like that. Now, do you think that the possible outcome, because I do think that this was there despite his age in comparison to everyone else, I think a wide receiver outcome was in the cards potentially for Mike Evans, and I'm not sure if that's possible anymore. And with the news that we recently got with Chris Godwin, as you outlined with the pup list, we love these experts on Twitter that understand a complex medical environment much more than I do, right?
Sure.
But it seems like he's even further on the timeline. Now, as Hayden and I always do in our show, we followed the money. We saw that Russell Gage got a 3-year, $30 million contract, a slot player who can also win on the outside. And we know how many of those have thrived with Tom Brady in the past. That's why I was in on Russell Gage, even jumping up 20 spots. And I would still rank Russell Gage ahead of Julio Jones. But again, what the hell has changed while everyone was down from the quarterback 3 last year to the quarterback 10? And it's just kind of threading that needle of value, I think, and hitting the right ones at the right spots.
Well, threading the needle isn't that hard. So this is the thing, and this is why I got a little testy. I got a little old man shakes fist at clouds.
I saw it. I noticed.
Yeah, because all of this stuff, it's July 27th. Look, the name of the game is still getting pieces of good, delicious, big pies.
For sure.
And then we'll figure out all kinds of events. We'll figure out how those get cut up. Most importantly, if someone can play. And still, again, and I know Antonio Brown only played half the season last year, but Rob Gronkowski was around for about 2/3 of the season last year. So in last year's environment, and again, the Julio Jones signing, and there's what's really funny about this, Josh, what's comical, it's all a farce, right? I mean, really what's good for your soul is to be able to step back to the perspective sometimes that it's all a farce, including me, what I'm doing, pretending I can predict the future with the rest of us. But
player picks are fun. It's fun.
They are fun. No, it is fun. It is fun. But here's the thing that's funny about it, Josh. Okay. It's 30% possible, maybe a little more, that Julio Jones makes no significant impact at all in the Tampa Bay Bucs offense. If it looks like last year, he won't. If it looks like last year, he's a negligible impact. And the fact that he was out, we're going to find out his contract terms. Have you seen how much they paid him? I don't know.
It's just a 1-year deal, though. And I believe
the fact that we don't know is probably telling, right?
Yeah,
because if it was like $8 million or something, we would know that.
I think he suggested it might be around the $6 million range, but still, that's less than, what Russell Gage is going to earn over the next 2 years. He was the priority.
Right. And as Stephen Holder pointed out, the Colts need wide receivers. Matt Ryan knows Julio Jones. Right. And they didn't even kick their tires. They weren't interested. Whatever. But
I will say, Julio Jones and Mike Vrabel were never going to be a good fit.
That's fair. Matt Waldman brought out some stuff about this too. Yeah.
Yeah, because immediately when Julio missed time after they traded that second round pick for him, you could see Mike Vrabel seething at those press conferences. And he hated him because he wasn't going to practice. He wasn't going to do those things.
Right.
Now, I know Bruce Arians is gone, but the environment that maybe he has created with Tom Brady and a bunch of other veterans and handling personalities. Look, I know that Julio missed week 13, 14, 15, and he was banged up, for the second half of the season. But there were also portions where he averaged around 63 yards per game, where he was at pieces an important target in that offense. And I just wonder, to me, the biggest missing piece for what has thrived in this Bucs offense over the last few years is that intermediate seam target, and especially inside the 10, inside the 20 that Rob Gronkowski brought, right? Because that doesn't seem like that's coming back. I don't know if Julio's going to fit that. Potentially he could, but even a healthy Chris Godwin helps in that area. Yeah. So it's in the NFC South, Sig. I know we focus on the NFL at large, but there might be two frisky defenses there with the Saints and the Panthers, but no offense can keep up with them for 6 straight games. So that's another little factor here.
Yeah, I think that you're right to paint a picture. If we're talking in terms of rational coaching, Julio's on a pitch count. Julio's in a specialized role. The Julio of old, we're not going to see again. The bottom line is there's plenty of paths to value for Russell Gage. Look, if Tom Brady is last year's Tom Brady, chances are Russell Gage is at least going to be a push on the 6th, 7th round ADP he peaked at. But he still can catch 100 balls. Because again, I think especially in a best ball context, like Tom Brady doesn't care. Like there's no rule that says Tom Brady can't target someone 17 times in a game. I mean, if that's what's working, that's what's working. And he went out and called Russell Gage. Russell Gage thought it was a prank. I mean, Brady wanted Gage. Like you said, we still have to look at this in terms of priorities. We still have to look at this in terms of the relative attractiveness around the league of these guys. And the bottom line is still you want to get in on this Tampa offense. And the Julio signing, if anything, even if Julio doesn't amount to anything, Josh, it signifies that this team is going for it. And this team is still going to win. And how do they win with the 700 some pass attempts? Yeah. We know that Tom Brady is not going to take his foot off the gas, and I don't think that Todd Bowles is going to be any kind of impact on that.
This is the quarterback that can open with 9 straight passing plays if he wants to. If they have heavy boxes because they want to stop Leonard Fournette, if he's just coming off a great game where their run defense is struggling up the middle, then boom, Brady's going to open up with 9 straight pass attempts. You outlined the Russell Gage. And it's been an interesting path to follow this offseason. And I'm with you. For the people that are like, I have 0% exposure to Russell Gage, I would say that you have left some chicken on the bone here. Because I think Russell Gage is going to be he was a good player in Atlanta based on what he was at LSU as a special teamer and how he emerged. And again, as you outlined with Brady zeroing in on that signing. But look, he moved up. I think he's the 5th highest mover since the early parts of May. 29 spots he's moved up. That's only after like Nico Collins, Jalen Tolbert, Paris Campbell, and Robbie Anderson. That's it. And so now, heck, I be honest with you, was even drafting him around where he was going, which was the Elijah Moore territory as wide receiver 34. But if that bounces from, I don't know, the 71st overall ADP to where, I don't know, MVS is going
Sure.
at
Oh, slam
91
dunk.
or Chris Olave at 91, heck,
Right.
Treylon Burks or Tyler Lockett at 96 and 100, feed
That's
it to me.
easy. That's
Feed it to
easy.
me.
Any drop, I would say, if you're looking at this as a range of outcomes, and we should really be looking at things as ranges of outcomes at this point. And what we're waiting for is some small early reveals through camp and preseason, but really it's that first month. I'm becoming more and more convinced, Josh, that with good old traditional redraft fantasy football, and honestly, all of all the emanations of versions of fantasy football is about getting the right takeaways from that first month. Is realizing where you were wrong. I like to make these aphorisms, right? Fantasy football is more about realizing when you were wrong, being the first one to realize it, instead of being about being right. Because we're all going to be wrong about more things than we're right about, probably. And if you can figure out quickly, like, I was wrong. We were talking about this. I can't remember who I was talking about this with. Even the idea that when it's players you liked and you're emotional, I think it was the Fantasy Whisperers. We're talking about this. Like if you would like somebody and it makes it through like your emotional force shield of, I don't want to believe good things, confirmation bias, etc. And by the way, confirmation bias can be right. Confirmation bias doesn't mean you're on the wrong track. That if it pierces through that, Josh, then you should be, especially like if week 2 or 3, you feel this sense of disappointment, like, this was a player that I have whatever percentage shares of, etc.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it's going to happen for this player, even if everyone else is already on to that they're not going to hit ADP. But if you can be the first one to really understand that, and then the implications of it, because chances are there's some sort of corresponding move that's the right move to make, right? So emotion belongs in fantasy football. And that, go ahead.
No, I think that's really important for resetting yourself after the first month, as you just outlined. To me, what gets lost in this portion of the calendar when training camp rolls around, heck, even before training camp, when preseason rolls around, is we get so nailed into what a player previously did based on statistics, raw numbers, but also like how we perceive them. Whereas I think we lose a little bit, and this takes a lot of digging and a lot of work, is figuring out what each team wants to be at like their best form, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is where we can find some real advantages here. Sometimes that's a new play caller, a new style to the offense, a new quarterback, and just not being able to wrap our heads around how significant of a leap that can be. Heck, it's why I thought Damien Harris was going to be an awesome player last season.
Right.
It's because when you viewed how the Patriots were changing away from the Cam Newton, whoever else they had at quarterback, to what Mac Jones, and they wanted to play bully ball with investing so much in the offensive line, and basically what they were telling you over and over and over with multiple tight end sets, boom, we found an advantage there, you know? So I think like that's where we can be a leg up on the opposition that focuses so much on the production last year versus the final form of what a team at their highest level would want to be this year.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff to unpack here. First of all, and I think we're all learning this, being people alive in the early 21st century, Josh, what has happened before does not present the bounds of what's going to happen today or tomorrow, right? Don't assume that everything that's going to happen is going to be something that's already happened. No. That's going to lead you down the wrong track. And again, outliers win fantasy championships. So it's actually the players that aren't necessarily going to fall within the balance of what's happened before that are the most important players to identify. Past performance is no guarantee of future success and all that good stuff. But I think almost without exception, Josh, the range of outcomes is wider than what we contemplate. Always. This is why the Russell Gage talk was annoying me. Because look, there are plenty of situations where everybody who was in on a player is going to be a winner, and everybody who was in on a player is going to be a loser. It doesn't matter. The important decision isn't what did you pay for Russell Gage. It's did you make Russell Gage part of your targets? That's the actual important position, not, if you took him in the 6th and now he's going to go in the 8th, you're on tilt. No, because if he's good in this offense, he's going to be worth more than a 6th-round pick. That's why everybody was willing to push him up the board. Go ahead. You want to say it? Go ahead.
No, and not to pivot, but I'm checking out the chat. Awesome discussions they're having. Looking at Travis's comment here. So essentially what Josh is saying is Daniel Jones to the moon. Travis, I'm not saying you're wrong here, but
Right.
it's not necessarily Daniel Jones, even though when you're drafting 2 or 3 quarterbacks in Underdog, boom, he's definitely one of my targets, as is Trevor Lawrence all the time. I don't think that people are being able to grasp the differences in what a Brian Daboll plus top 10 offensive tackle can
Right.
do to what the Giants offense can be this year. Take, for example, Kenny Galladay, who fell into the bucket of wide receivers as veterans who switch teams in free agency. It's a dangerous bucket to have. It hasn't had many hits in the past. Trades have, free agency hasn't. And guess what? Kenny Galladay was garbage last year. But to me, when I dug into why that happened, is one, he's still the same player. He's still a contested catch, seam, inside breaking route, that type of guy. But he only saw 19% of his targets were 20 plus yards down the field. When you go and look at his best years in Detroit, it was very even. 33% deep, 33% intermediate, 33% short. Guess what? Brian Daboll now is not Freddie Kitchens, is not Jason Garrett. They have an offensive tackle grouping and maybe even some interior pieces that will allow them to be more aggressive in throwing down the field. And so Kenny Galladay still has the old man strength in his back. He's only 29, but can still get more of those opportunities. Plus, when you consider that during his time in Detroit, he had a contested catch rate of about 65 to 70% in terms of success. Last year it was down to 48%. So like naturally we should see bumps up in his game. And then that's not even talking about one of my favorite picks back on June 6th was Kadarius Toney as wide receiver 49, because all of the negative outcomes were already factored in to where Kadarius Toney was going, yet people were still like, oh, I don't want him on my team. But when you have to take a step back and take 3 steps back and say, well, if there were positive or even middle outcomes thought about here, he would be ranked higher than all of these rookies. He would be around wide receiver 36. But again, as wide receiver 49, why not? What's the harm in taking him there? And I know he's raised a lot since then, but again, I think we double count the negatives at times, if that makes sense.
Well, it's because there's an emotional part of it, especially if you took the ride down with somebody. You think, oh, not again, Kenny Galladay, not again, Kadarius Toney. I bought into that one big week you had, but I like focusing on the Giants for a second. And Daniel Jones, and I think, like you said, there's football, Josh, there's X and O, there's personnel reasons, but there's also the reason that it's not a miserable workplace anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
like AJ Green from Cincinnati to Arizona, like when a dude doesn't want to be there, like that impacts you and you're the least efficient wide receiver in the league. Not saying he was great last year, but that was even a solid pick in round 17 and 18.
Yeah. And Daniel Jones, the one thing you can say about Daniel Jones, I was talking about this earlier this week on a show, Josh, he's courageous. I mean, the dude lays it all out there when he plays. Whatever's not clicking, it wasn't because he's tentative or he's not fully engaged in the game. But like you said, it's the Jason Garrett offense, right? It's this gain exactly 10 yards on 3 plays type of offense. And don't assume that the front office and the coaches are in alignment. This is another good thing about the Giants. Now they are in alignment. Dave Gettleman might be buying groceries that Jason Garrett doesn't know how to cook, right? Organization matters. The workplace atmosphere matters. People's sense of optimism, willing to buy into the program matters. And now there's probabilities with the Giants offense that weren't there last year, including Daniel Jones, especially in the best ball league format that allows you to take chances and not necessarily get penalized when you're wrong. And the other thing people got to remember about Daniel Jones is he can fly. I mean, he can bust off a nice 50, 60, 70-yard run. In fantasy, remember Terrell Pryor? I mean, in fantasy, if he's given opportunities to, and why not? What I like about this from both Brian Daboll and Daniel Jones' point of view, Josh, is let it ride. Like, go ahead, let's see. Like, let's find out. Because Daniel Jones has a chance to make hundreds of millions of dollars or be on the swirl down the drain and be a backup track. I mean, this year is going to be massive for determining what happens for the rest of his career. And for Brian Daboll, hey, he can let it ride. So I want to step back to the macro and using the Giants as an example. If you were going to focus on just one thing, it is isolate all the changes and then monitor in training camp and preseason. What are we learning about how those changes are affecting what we're going to see this year and how it's going to be different?
Yeah. It's as simple as Brian Daboll being able to shape shift his offense based on the positive personnel he has in each location. He did it at Alabama. When you go back and look at those games, it was what? Jalen Hurts and a whole bunch of running backs. And guess what? They were a ground focus attack. We've seen that he's gone through a whole bunch of wide receivers, having an alpha separator on the outside, being able to cycle between the Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley's, Gabriel Davis's of the world and setting them up for success, and how much the Bills set up with their offensive line as well. And you can kind of see the pieces working here. I'm with you on Daniel Jones, man. He's a gamer. He gets blinders on, and that's why we see a whole bunch of interceptions and sacks in the pocket, because he doesn't really have a sense of pressure around him. But then this all comes back to, I'll say it on your show because I don't have to say it on mine. I think there's a running back one overall potential ceiling for Saquon Barkley this year.
Well, yeah. And he's already kind of shown that, right? We just need him to be used correctly. And we're hearing indications that he will. I'm moved around more than I was since I was in college. Absolutely. I think Dwayne McFarland pointed out too that he started slow because he was coming back from an ACL tear. And he was fine for a couple of games last year until, including that the wheel route against the Saints, that huge play, until he got hurt on a fluke play. And then he wasn't quite the same. And then the Giants offense was just like, you have to really pay people. I feel so bad for Giants fans. Their offense at the end of the season was just not even trying, like punting on third down kind of offense. So got us Alec in the chat room. This is a good one because we see, speaking of players coming back earlier than expected, James Robinson not on the PUP. Is Travis Etienne one of those players like Gage where, hey, his ADP may fall, but the important thing is whether you're in or out on him? What do we think about Robinson, Joshua? How do we make sense out of the Jags?
Yeah, we just did a show on this yesterday, and I hate calling them busts, but at their current ADP, players that I'm avoiding, right? And honestly, Travis Etienne was one of those for multiple reasons. One, where he's currently being selected right now, it's around players that are true feature backs. You know, when James Conner, without Chase Edmonds this year and without Chase Edmonds last year, saw 70-80+% of the snaps. You have even Cam Akers, who's going about 10 spots after Travis Etienne, who in that 5-game stretch, 5.5 months after coming back from the Achilles tear, was still averaging 19 touches per game, even when Darrell Henderson was out there. Okay. So I like Travis Etienne as a talent, but I'm not even saying that James Robinson has to be good coming back from an Achilles, because that list is difficult to overcome. But if he just is present, then that takes opportunities away from Travis Etienne at that price of around 36 overall in round 3, which in like the end of the round 4, early round 5 territory, I'd be much likelier to take him, because I also think Etienne might be one of these better and best ball players in that you don't have to necessarily worry about opportunity. You just can get the big plays either in the receiving game or in the rushing game, and those just get handed to you. Right. Mm-hmm. And James Robinson, what we've heard from John Shipley and many other great writers around the Jaguars, is he's the trusted pass pro back. And I know that gets really frustrating for people to hear out there, but you know this, when last season, the Jaguars dealt miserably with 5 rushers, even 6 rushers matching up one-on-one. Travis Etienne's also coming out on a significant injury himself. And so if James Robinson is out there for those pass pro reps, they're splitting the early down work, then again, just the elimination of potentially being one of the 60+% running players like we saw last year, and Travis Etienne maybe being one of those as James Robinson missed time this year, that's not in the range of outcomes for me anymore.
Yeah, I think this is a tough offense to decipher. I love that we can cite John Shipley now. I love that.
Oh, love it.
He's awesome.
Love John.
And I've been a fan of John Shipley for like a decade. And this Jacksonville offense, I have trouble with how to decipher it, Josh. I'm interested because the pie's going to get bigger. This is another workplace bounce, right? Has there been a worse workplace in NFL history than the Urban Meyer 2021 Jags? I don't think so. Really. I say this every time just to make sure people hear me. You can be the biggest Urban Meyer hater. And from what I understand, it was worse than what you think it was. It was even worse than that. And that's going to help everybody. Doug Peterson is the perfect tonic to get this cleansed. But I don't know how to decipher the offense because there's so many options. Now we're going to be watching in training camp in preseason, and I thought I heard a little dripple about Trevor Lawrence and Zay Jones.
Yeah.
Which, boy, that would mess everything up for everybody, right? No one's in on Zay Jones. Some people are maybe a little bit on Ingram, a lot more people on Christian Kirk. Marvin Jones is still there. He's like indefatigable in the red zone. That means something. And so on. Laviska Shenault even. I mean, everybody
Evan
has
Ingram
a
is
chance.
tied in 22.
Right. I mean, because we know about his talent and the money, following the money there, they basically gave him franchise tag money, just a couple million off of franchise tag money. Go ahead.
And Doug Pearson got some tight ends paid when
Right.
he was there with the Philadelphia Eagles. The name always escapes me, but it was Zach Ertz, and who was the other guy who went to the Chicago Bears? God, my brain just fried on this. Anyways, he got him about $8 million per year,
Right.
and then he fizzled out and went over to the Indianapolis Colts. Someone in the
Trey
chat,
Burton.
yes, I think it was Trey
My
Burton.
brain said LJ Smith at first. You know what my brain
Oh, that's old.
Smith.
That's ancient. That's ancient. I also think we're though counting it twice negatively when we consider Christian Kirk, because he was going as around wide receiver 40, wide receiver 42. But so many people think, oh, they overpaid him in free agency. And oh, how could they do that? They smashed it. Well, that's good for us. Like a vertical slot player for a quarterback who is incredibly aggressive, who even last year, despite how much disruption he faced, avoided sacks at a really high rate, had a lot of his teammates let him down because the preparation was abysmal last year. Like Christian Kirk, again, in that wide receiver 40 range, makes total sense to me. And even in fact, maybe 4 or 5 spots higher than that, despite, again, the baked in negativity of the contract he was handed out. And I'm in on Evan Ingram, like I said. So
yeah. And this is again where best ball helps make fantasy football more fun, or at least drafting more fun, because you don't necessarily need to be right about the weeks or the matchups or the stretches of the season that a player has strong performances. You just have to feel confident that they are at some point things are going to get aligned. And I always use that word alignment too, going back to what we were talking about with changes and the situations to identify, or at least situations to identify the possibility and look for the signs of that alignment, of that best case scenario. Maybe a best case scenario we didn't even contemplate, like Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford, a quarterback change, right? Big changes can equal even bigger changes than we contemplate. All right, the fire hose is on. I always think of Kramer, Stanley P. What was his name in UHF? Weird Al Yankovic. See, I am ancient. Time to drink from the fire hose, and that's training camp, right, Josh? I certainly think we shouldn't feel free to ignore things coming out of training camp, and again, especially when they are attached to trying to decipher what big changes are going to mean for fantasy. So, just when I say fire hose, what's been worth drinking? What's some stuff as the fire hose has been blasting the last couple of days that you're like, okay, I feel like I should pay attention to that?
Again, I keep coming back to us having the inability to predict how massive changes to organizations can impact the production of a certain player heading into this year. And look, San Francisco is going to change drastically, I think. For all my qualms with Jimmy Garoppolo, throwing over the middle of the field is pretty damn difficult. You have to have confidence. You have to have a willingness to hit the windows. You have to have the arm to do it. Again, willing to make those mistakes. And that's why so many of those interceptions look bad. It's because it's trash in there. I'm a big Trey Lance fan, 100%. I also am a huge fan of Deebo Samuel as a pure wide receiver, and I'm glad we get to see that a bit more this year. But the player to me that we don't have a good understanding of based on ADP on where he's going this year and the upside that could be there is Brandon Aiyuk. This is a player who was drafted ahead of Deebo Samuel last season, and what stands out to me is when you look at outside the numbers and down the field, 10 plus yards, Deebo only had 9 targets there last year. Brandon Aiyuk had 22. A pivot from Jimmy G to Trey Lance, stronger arm, willingness, that's no longer a blind spot of this offense. And when you consider that teams, defenses namely, will not want to play too high shells against a San Francisco 49ers running game, especially the quarterback that is a threat in that portion of the field too, I think we're going to get isolated coverage on the outside a bit more often. And that Brandon Aiyuk, which everyone agreed after his rookie season had incredible talent, Now it's like they've forgotten about it. They don't care, even though he was more productive this past season. And again, being able to get him is around the wide receiver 43 range in an offense that we want pieces of already. Yes, I want it.
Yeah. And Aiyuk's so tough because last year he started out in the doghouse. I want to say I saw like a tiny indication that maybe it might be happening again. And whether we're looking at Philly or San Francisco, there's a lot of reason for ebullient optimism, right? Like really, really optimistic projections for this offense because we're going to see a Kyle Shanahan offense with a true 11-on-11 football, which we haven't seen since there was a healthy Robert Griffin. He didn't have anything remotely like what Trey Lance has to work with. And Philadelphia also has the capacity now to really put defenses in binds that they can't solve, period. Like, just forget it. You can't. You got Jalen Hurts 11-on-11 football. You have a running game that really came together because of an offensive line and a will to do that. And now you have the triad of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. So good luck. Good luck trying to cover all those things. And it could make for hyper efficient offenses. So even if pass attempts are among the lowest in the league, targets are among the lowest in the league, raw target totals. We already saw A.J. Brown crush on a small target share. So we already know he can do that, right? So it might be that we look back at any sort of pessimism about Debo. And Debo's tough. Debo's one of the toughest cases to project because he himself, at least there's indications that he doesn't want to be part of the backfield like he was.
For sure.
So do they honor that? Does a deal get done? What if a deal gets done? Does that mean that they've worked all this out and he's going to be a pure wide receiver? But even as a pure wide receiver, he may justify the second round.
1,400 yards last year.
So, I mean, and if he does stay involved in the backfield, now he was a first round value again. So there's so many range outcomes here. And I guess the bottom line is both San Francisco and Philadelphia, we should still feel encouraged to take those plunges. Now, when you get to where the rubber meets the road with Aiyuk, however, that's where you get to some either or choices with someone like a Kadarius Toney, who you just said, or even Chris Olave. Every time I look at that Saints offense now, I think, wow. You know what I see when I look at Chris Olave, Josh? I see 2013 Keenan Allen. I see a really hyper competent guy in an offense that's going to.
Oh, he's a pro already. At least that's how I felt coming into.
And that's kind of how Keenan Allen was. I forget what he fell in the draft for. He's like a knee thing or something like that.
Yeah.
He fell to the
third round. And his quarterback was so brutal at Cal. Remember that Zach Maynard? I think it was his half brother or something. One of the worst. It was like Reggie Ball and Calvin Johnson and Zach Maynard and Keenan Allen. It was a
Right, exactly. I'm trying to think of who the quarterback was for Mettenberger with Landry and Beckham.
And Jahan Dotson and whatever quarterback he had to play with this year was pretty rough.
Right. Sometimes it's best to just say that instead of even trying to remember the name, even though it's fun to have the exercise of Jordan Tamu, quarterbacks who really, if a wide receiver prospect had played with a different quarterback in college, maybe we would have thought different things about them. So get on these offenses now with Aiyuk. My fear is just that I will miss out on someone else around that same point in the draft. But I think that the bottom line is, and this is one of the things that's really stood out to me drafting, the 5th to the 10th or 11th round is really, really rich.
Mm-hmm.
And in every round, there should be 2 or 3 or 4 guys you want to take. It's hard to even figure out which one you want to target, and team builds can help. And it really brings me back around to the auction format, and it takes time and it takes a lot of devoted people to really do an auction league and do it justice. But in an auction draft, you really can break up your draft capital and say, well, I want to have 2 first-round picks and 2 fifth-round picks and 2 sixth-round picks and 2 seventh-round picks and 2 eighth-round picks and the rest 18th round picks. I don't care. It'd be really cool if we can merge that somehow and figure out a way to have the classic draft along with it. It's like you get dealt like in a board game, Josh, like dollar bills of certain denominations, and that's all you get. And you don't get any change if you spend more than something actually costs. But in an auction, with the variable of human psychology, of course, you can mess around with that and how you break that up. Okay, so Brandon Aiyuk, San Francisco, Trey Lance, that's all super, super exciting. What else is something that as the fire hose has been going by, you're pulling out and saying, I'm going to, at least this is on my radar now?
I mean, I'll try to shine the light on some doubts that I receive whenever I send certain tweets on players. I'm not sure where you fall on the spectrum, but Gabriel Davis, to me, it does not matter what his past production is. at all.
Right.
Like we just need to forget it. And sorry if you've talked about this in the show 17 times, because I feel like I have in ours. Yeah. But the Bills previously did not believe Gabriel Davis was a full-time player based on the end of the 2020 season when John Brown went down and Gabriel Davis was thrust in the starting lineup and had a ludicrously bad catch rate, like 28 or 35%. So then that offseason, they go out and prioritize Emmanuel Sanders and keep Cole Beasley around. I know that how Gabe finished the year with 4 touchdowns and 200 yards, but let's not forget through 13 weeks, Emmanuel Sanders was pretty damn good, you know? And so that was smart by them. And the team realized once Gabriel Davis was in the starting lineup for 70 plus, 80 plus % of the snaps, that now he's ready. And so to me, this isn't a pass production crutch that I'm relying on for negative arguments. It's taking the word and the actions of an organization that right now is a top 5 franchise in the league, because based on all of that, they're all in on Gabriel Davis and they are not concerned in the least that he can step up to this point. So again, maybe someone that's never had 1,000 yards, it can be tough to stomach him as the wide receiver 21. I'm all for it.
Well, we have to be careful. I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I think Gabriel Davis is one of the more elementary projections in terms of the range of outcomes, that the range of outcomes, the upper end of it is high enough to justify a 5th round pick, maybe even a 4th round pick. Again, there's going to be so many players, Josh, that around week 3 or week 4, we're going to see just how wrong we were. And they're going to be probably the most important players. And the whole fantasy community, again, like Cooper Kupp, there's nobody saying Cooper Kupp could be the wide receiver 1 overall. I don't think so. It was more like, you're going to take Woods, you're going to take Kupp. Both
but
of
once
them.
Again, it's wrapping your head around how significant a quarterback change from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford was.
Right. And it's going to be something with Gabriel Davis that if there's a change here, the change is that he's totally unobstructed for snaps and targets.
Yep.
And we see, and again, there's the background. Andrew Erickson and I did like a whole show on this. They're just all good offenses. Focus on good offenses. There's so many more paths to the top. Really, there's so many more paths to the top end range of values. And some of this stuff is totally unforeseeable, injuries and so on, players getting demoted and whatever. But knowing that these are the situations that allow overachievers to happen, multiple overachievers to happen, and just let that guide you. And again, that's a beautiful thing for that 5th to 11th round range, because that's how you end up on Devin Singletary. That's how you end up on A.J. Dillon, right? That's how you end up on Amon-Ra St. Brown, another player that has been massively heated debates. And I think that there's just as much a chance that not only is Amon-Ra Brown not a bust at his 6th round ADP or whatever it's up to now, but again, we look back and say we weren't high enough. We didn't go high enough on him. What are your thoughts on old Amon-Ra, the Sun God?
Well, I think the post-buy rookie bump is actually a real thing. We talk about this on our show all the time. Hayden has gone deep into the spreadsheets and in the lab, and it's a fact. Like after bye weeks, going back to what we were saying about bad environments, things slow down for an NFL player. You know, when you have a week to digest this new environment that you're in, how the cycle is so much different than having to go to class while in college. Again, having a couple extra days just to reevaluate how your life is going. I know I'm diving into their brains and not the physical nature of everything we saw on the field. I think that's legitimately a real thing. You know, think if you ever started a job, how your head is spinning for the first month. You know, and that's not when training camp starts, because training camps are on college campuses. It's once the NFL season goes. Think about all of you, if you work in football, writing about it, you know this, every Monday's the same sig, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday. So being able to take a step or 2 or 3 back from that and breathing, it's going to impact you the rest of the way. But also with Amon-Ra St. Brown, the biggest difference for him in those portions was when Dan Campbell, and obviously now the new OC/play caller that's attached to him, that's when they took over. That's when they took the job away from Anthony Lynn, and they immediately inserted Amon-Ra St. Brown as like their Robert Woods, to be honest with you, a guy who can run and be an extra tight end on the end of the line of scrimmage and manufacture touches for him, delayed things on the backside that are these slip patterns. The only real concern that I have, if I'm not saying we're drafting him at his peak, because man, what we saw at the end of last year was insane.
Top 5.
I mean, it was insane.
He's going to be the first, if he catches 8 balls in the first game, Josh, I think he's going to set a record for the consecutive games with 8 catches already.
He's being drafted, though, around some like real alpha talents. Like when you look at them, like true X wide receivers, and Rashad Bateman and DK Metcalf. I can even go further down the list, and Amari Cooper, so on and so forth. But it was in that same time, obviously TJ Hawkinson missed. They didn't have a DJ Chark, and maybe Jameson Williams works out in the first after 7 or 6 weeks of the season. But that's my only hang up with him as wide receiver 29. But I'm not down him at all. Like when you go back and watch him, he's a really fun player, and know he's going to be in the league for 12 years.
And they love him. The coach loves him. Ben Johnson, the new OC you referred to, that's who activated him, really. And that is, there's a background here too, as strange as it is. I was going to wear my cool throwback Detroit Lion shirt. I'm getting ready to go to Michigan in a couple of days, so I'm saving it. Because can we trust the Lions? Because that's the other side. It's good offenses.
They're spicy, man. They're fun.
They're fun. And there's another thing when we get to assumption of rational coaching or assumption of rational personnel deployment and things like that, Josh. Well, who are the organizations that we trust? I think Philadelphia gained a lot of trust from us last year. I think Detroit gained a lot of trust from us last year. So when we project these things and we're looking for overachievers, those organizations that we trust to act validly on the information they get, because where you started here was the bye week, and we always talk about this a lot during the waiver wire shows, Josh, during the season, that the bye week is a chance for an organization to reset. It's not just the players. The whole organization can take a breath, look at stuff, make adjustments that they just can't do whenever they're in the grind of the season. And you could be like, we talk about the big deltas from the changes over the offseason, and we incorporate that into our drafting. The bigger deltas of the deltas that can happen in season often can happen coming out of a bye week, whether it's a team deciding to have different priorities or making personnel changes or role changes and things like that. And Amon-Ra St. Brown's in an organization we trust to maximize his talent, which we already saw they're willing to use in multiple ways. I think it was Benjamin Raven, I think, who was on a show with Pat Doherty saying they want to run the offense through him. I believe it. Like you said, a Robert Woods type of player. I believe it. And he already demonstrated top 5 wide receiver production. And look, you can say, well, who else was on the field, et cetera, et cetera. But that chemistry's proven now. And we know that's Jared Goff's game. Jared Goff's game is, what does the offense structure that works and makes it easy for me, right? Why did Jared Goff fail in the Super Bowl? Because Bill Belichick figured out how to cut the cord so that whatever Jared Goff was looking at when the ball was snapped was different than what he was prepared for mentally from Sean McVay being in his head. And I think that Ben Johnson has figured out some of those low-hanging fruit type things. And then you have the tactical value of a TJ Chark, a tactical value of adding a Jameson Williams that makes all those plays easier and more efficient, right?
So conversely,
yeah,
and not to switch topics on you.
Sure.
And I think that it is really simple instruction to say, hey, at the very least, focus on good offenses, because, if the teams are good, they're going to score more points than their opponents, and that's going to equal fantasy points. How are you handling Darnell Mooney as wide receiver 28? Because I don't know if any of us are in on, the Bears being an 8-win team this year. He's going right next to Amon-Ra St. Brown as wide receiver 28. You can listen to the argument that says, well, who else is going to get targets on that team? But if they aren't scoring a lot of points, if I don't know anything about Luke Getsy, that offensive line, even after paying Riley Reif, $10 million at this point of the offseason, that's Tevin Jenkins, who was like a second-round pick, can't even stay on the field as like the second-team right tackle. Anyways, it all seems like a mess, doesn't it? Like, I love the running situation, love Khalil Herbert, but there's only so much you can say, oh, he's going to get all the targets, when at times it feels like all the targets might be meaningless.
True. They might be low value targets. I mean, they might not be targets that are worth very much. So, man, I'm kind of falling for Darnell Mooney. And this is where I'm showing everybody can just say, don't trust me as an analyst when I reveal something like this. So Dan Pompey wrote an article for The Athletic about Darnell Mooney. And maybe it's also that he played down here in Tulane. New Orleans, us New Orleans folks. I'm only a New Orleans folk for 4 years, but in my heart, I've been a New Orleans folk for decades. Loves us some New Orleans. And the things that I read about Darnell Mooney, I mean, it really does sound like he is just driven, truly driven. He's bulked up a little bit. He has unbelievable conditioning, right? He has a very rare quickness speed combination. But what specifically was in the Dan Pompei article, other than portraying him as this relentless worker who knows what all the doubts are about him and wants to just quiet all the doubters, is that Luke Getsy has, number one, moved him all around the formation and moved him pre-snap, right? He's in the slot, now he's outside. He's outside, now he's in motion, right? And that Getsy specifically wants him to explode off the ball on every snap to disguise whether it's a run play or a pass play, right? Because Mooney's the guy you got to account for in this offense. And Justin Fields' running ability, we'll see. But Mooney is the guy that can allow a lot of other things to work in this offense. And the other thing about Mooney is, if we're looking at it in terms of the Jags and the Giants and these offenses that were just miserable, and the idea there's going to be some sort of bounce. We don't know how big. Again, this is why we're paying attention to training camp in the preseason to give us some clues. So if he was 1,000-yard receiver in that offense, right? So Allen Robinson was a receiver in that offense last year. And what are we projecting him to do? Now, granted, Allen Robinson's going to an ideal environment. The point being that this offense might have artificially depressed everything, at least in the passing game. And what can Darnell Mooney do? The classic third-year leap. And then there is Fields and Mooney have worked together so much that if there's one player that Justin Fields is going to be able to tune into a radio station and not hear static, that's going to be the guy. So I fully endorse people taking the plunge on Mooney where he's going. Got
it. Quickly on Allen Robinson, since you missed that, or since you mentioned it, sorry. I was one of these people that I'm not going to say that Allen Robinson lost a step, but I think he was a bit disinterested in playing for the Bears last season.
Remember Randy Moss with the Raiders?
Oh yeah. But talk about perfect role for him. So what stands out to me is, and sometimes I focus a little bit too much in certain areas of the field.
Yeah.
Inside the 20 and inside the 10 for the Rams. And no team throws more inside the 10-yard line than the Rams do across the league. As we saw when they added Odell Beckham last year, buddy Matt Waldman always talks about this. Wide receivers who can win big and wide receivers who can win small. Odell, at his peak performance, has always been able to do that. And from the first game that you saw him with the Rams, he was doing it again. So what the Rams like to do inside the 10-yard line is have Cooper Kupp and a bunch set on the front side, and then have really this ISO receiver on the backside in isolated coverage. That was, again, Odell. So you saw those fade patterns to the pylon. You saw those quick slants that, boom, first 3 steps, and you're creating separation, the ball's on you. 12 targets, I believe, Odell had with the Rams inside the 10. I believe he had 8 touchdowns there. I mean, Allen Robinson hasn't had a large touchdown environment since the 2017 season. Mm-hmm. I understand that based on the production last year, you might say that he's washed. I'm all in at wide receiver 22 because 2 wide receivers can succeed here. And for a team when high value, 6 points are pretty important for fantasy football,
right?
And that is such a key role for what the Rams put to the table and why they succeeded last year, that it's so clear that A-Rob fits directly into that role for them this year.
Yeah, touchdowns might not be sticky year to year, player to player, but I think they're pretty sticky offense, like quarterbacks, offenses. Like, we know this is going to be a great pass offense as long as Matthew Stafford's elbow doesn't explode. We'll make sure that everything's okay there, but he's throwing on the first day of camp, so we're putting that back down to like DEFCON 4.8 or something like that. It's always good to talk to Josh Norris. If you guys don't know him, Underdog. And it's awesome, man. You have so many claims to fame in our space now.
Like, what?
You do. Someone mentioned your mock draft. We go off the rails here. But the first claim to fame is you shared with everybody. And it's great because we should share our triumphs. We should share our great moments as we go off the rails here. You just got engaged.
I did. Lovely lady. She sticks with me through football season. She mentioned to me that if it didn't happen before football season, then she was going to get frustrated because
it's good.
She knows life is over after that. No, it was in Paris. I love Paris. I've been to Paris about, I think this is the 4th time. To me, you talk about New Orleans speaking to you. Again, I don't know French that well, but the city to me is just so beautiful. And I think part of it, I live in Brooklyn now. There's no sight lines in Manhattan. Everything is so tall that it feels like the sky has evaporated unless you look directly up. Everything is notched down in Paris, where every top of the building and with the shops underneath. Everything's so clean. The subway is amazing. And I just love to eat. And so building a trip around eating, but then also getting engaged by finding a location that was not the Eiffel Tower, that instead I wanted something a bit more, unique to us. Finding a photographer to take pictures for us, showing up, Sig, you'll appreciate this. Walking in, and at 9:30 a.m., because we were advised to get there early, so no one else was there. A 15-person photography tour was walking in directly in front of us. It's this large garden, and I knew that they were going directly to the spot that I had planned and never seen before. And so we get there, and there was this little moment, because I was like, oh, how am I going to do this with all these people here? And without knowing what was about to happen, she turned to me and said, let's just wait for them to leave. In that moment,
the microcosm of hopefully how your marriage goes, right?
Let's just wait for them to leave. And so it was like a little reassurance in that little moment that I was like, you know what? She's right. I'll take a step, take a pause, take a breath. They left, and then boom. It was a perfect setting for it, and then a perfect weekend after that.
Yeah. Well, again, there's connections via France. There's a statue of Joan of Arc, made of Orleans, down in the French market, and so on and so forth. Very French here. But you talked about a lot of things. And I think that Paris has some of the same. I've been to Paris once, took a nap under the Eiffel Tower, woke up and opened my eyes to being under the Eiffel Tower, which was just something I'll never forget in my life. And there's so much history in Paris, and just culture, art.
Puts into perspective how new everything is here whenever you're in Europe for anything.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's why they call it the old world, right? But Paris and New Orleans, both of these feel like you're in a snow globe, kind of, just that you have a sense of where you are in an environment, just the arrondissements and things like that. And it's the districts here, at the wards. 7th Ward, 9th Ward, Lower 9th Ward, at the arrondissements in Paris.
Do they I've never been to New Orleans. I need to go. They,
before we get washed into the Gulf,
do they count it the same way that Paris does, with basically like in a circle around the center? Is that how the wards are done? Or
kind of, yeah. Well, and the other thing that's interesting here is that all New Orleans is divided up by the arpent. The arpent was a French way to divide up land, and it actually had to do with like in New Orleans, it also had to do with like every plot that was given out had like some riverfront, and then like went back almost like a mile. But you see the evidence. There's a man here who's a professor at Tulane, Richard Campanella. He calls himself a historical geographer. And to me, what he does is he unlocks the stories that are latent in everything you see everywhere. There's amazing stories. The world is just layered and layered and layered with stories that would captivate you. It's just a question of looking at things in a way, or having someone explain it to you, a way that unlocks the amazing, riveting nature of the story of the thing we're surrounded by every single day. So that's wonderful, man. And Paris and engagement and everything that went into how momentous that represented, like we were talking about before the show. My marriage and my connection with my wife is like it's like the sun coming up. It's like the light that I can see everything else in my life by. My engagement story was that I proposed to my wife at a Radiohead. I proposed to my wife at a Radiohead show when they were playing her favorite song.
Nice.
Fake plastic trees, for the record. Nice. The love of my life, Kate. But hey, marriage, hopefully for all of us out there, and I can talk about lots of other things, other side of marriage. Both of my parents were married. Both of my parents were married 4 times. My mom used to say, at least I found 4 men that would marry me. Anyway, hopefully what it stands for everybody out there is, like we talked about, that any life I can imagine on my own can't be as good as any life that we can have together. And I don't want to climb Mount Everest if you can't climb it with me. It doesn't mean anything if you're not there with me. And it's a beautiful thing. And love is really the glue of the universe in a lot of ways. And you mentioned you live in Brooklyn. You know this song, Roy Ayers, the song "We Live in Brooklyn"? I think Diggable Planets redid it. We live in Brooklyn, baby.
I will look this up. I think one note on the end of that is successful marriages come at all ages. Sure. And I am 34, turned 34 actually when we were in Paris.
You still look exactly the same as the first time I saw you.
I don't know about that. I think I'm in better shape now than I was at 24. But anyways, but I think waiting until I'm 34 was important. That wasn't the plan, but I was able to succeed and fail with work. I was able to succeed and fail with a lot of relationships, succeed and fail. And I don't think anything teaches you more about yourself than failed relationships, because not only do you realize how you react to other people that you think you know a lot of, but maybe not everything about. And you get very introspective in those moments too, And so going through a multitude of those, some short, some long, and just finding out who I am, who I want to be, but also who I want to be with, and how we all complement each other and supplement each other. I think that was an important factor.
Oh, yeah. We have it all backwards, right? I think there's some stuff about this in like Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance that we should never be picking some path for the rest of our life when we're 18. What do you even know about anything when you're 18? What do you know even is through some filters or something? I mean, maybe there are people that because of how they grew up are street smart and know a lot about the world, but then they probably have more emotional things and things that are not dealt with. Lord knows I have a suitcase full of these things in my life that I take with me everywhere I go that I've probably never dealt with and may not deal with from my childhood. So either way, when you get to 18, there's a lot more that you don't know than what you do know. And yet we're picking our major, we're picking our life path. And it's something that, like you said, but when you make the mistakes, one of the things I like about getting older is I hopefully stop making the same mistakes. Hopefully. And learn. I think mostly, as you get older, you just appreciate things more. You stop and smell the roses. The first thing on your to-do list every day is just appreciate that you're alive and take it in, because tomorrow's not promised to anybody.
Go for a walk.
Yeah. Like, I love the touch grass thing. I love that that's a thing on the internet. Go touch some grass. It's perfect because, like, remind yourself that you're in this amazing, rich, real world. Real in the sense that you can access it through your five senses. Because we're getting into some real shaky territory, right? Where the internet can basically manifest like a shapeshifter for whatever's going to soothe your brain and make the dopamine trip go, right?
Yeah.
It can become any form you want, anything.
Sure.
And all of us can be hacked. Any one of us can be hacked. So going out and touching, go ahead.
No, it's having a relationship with someone that is not at all a part of not only just like the football bubble that we live in every day, but just Twitter in general. Like, she doesn't care.
Good.
Is really enlightening, because to be honest with you, I think a lot of normal people, when they finish their job from 9 to 5, let's say it's a really normal 9 to 7 thing, they crave communication. They crave relationships.
Connection.
They crave friendships and connection. I've learned about myself that I feel like I am communicating all day, even if it's not face to face with someone. Sometimes it is with our shows with Hayden. But I feel like I've communicated all day with my friends that when 7 o'clock hits, I don't want to communicate with anyone. I don't really want to go out that often. Or go try to meet someone new. So it's an interesting dilemma that we are not dilemma, but factor in our relationship that we're still figuring out, because again, while the communication style is different and while the communication style has changed over the last few years, it is something that I've noticed about myself that I do feel as if I've interacted with friends all day long,
Oh yeah. We get a lot of, it's one of the things I like to say about our job. Like, we're indulged, everybody just wants to have someone say, I hear you, I can see you. We all want to be seen and heard. And we get that every single day. Our attention cravings, I don't want to speak for you, attention cravings. Certainly we get plenty of attention. And look, I'll just say this on this topic, because we've talked about football season, meaning we're not accessible really like we are. And the people that are in relationships, romantic relationships, committed life partnership type relationships with those of us in the growing group of people that are professional fantasy, when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro, right, Josh? The professional fantasy football analysts, those people in those committed life partnership type relationships with us, they're patient people. They're people that give us a wide berth, because we're lucky in a way that we get to do something we like for the most part as our job. But it also, like you said, distorts a lot of boundaries or makes there not be boundaries sometimes. And just listen to her. Whatever she says, just listen to her. She's probably right. She's probably right. That's my advice for you. My advice for everyone out there. It's great. It's great to have. It feels like we're all back. We're all elbow to elbow again. Underdog.
It's football season.
It's football season. Yeah, because it's information assimilation season and reacting and all that stuff. It's fantasy football season. We love all of you. We love having the opportunity to serve you. It's a privilege. Football guys, everything is blowing up. Underdog everywhere. Go out there, touch some grass, maybe do some drafts.